think the one thing I obsess about the most is how the hell can I do my job so that she has like high levels of self-esteem?
Right.
Because that's probably what worries me the most in the world we live in, right? And I don't think it's necessarily new. I just think it's exacerbated by the world we live in.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue podcast, the show where we talk about the successes and the stresses of becoming a dad and being a dad. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Laurence. A quick reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to register your interest in being a guest on a future episode. Joining me today is David. David is from Portugal and he's a relatively new father. When we filmed the episode, his daughter was about 3 months. So yeah, he's very new into being a father, and I found it super interesting, super valuable that he was willing to share his time with us to come on the show and talk about the life of a father so far. We get into what it's like to have a daughter when running a company, some of the concerns that he might have raising a daughter in this current world, and how he balances his relationship with his wife through the process of having their daughter as well. Some really interesting topics that we touched on. We're super appreciative for David taking the time during this early stages of being a dad, as I said. And I think it's really, really valuable hearing these sorts of stories. If you're a dad that of many, many years, think about reaching out to some of the dads that are in your circles that are maybe becoming new fathers or have recently become new fathers. I think it's a super valuable thing that we can do as parents that have been on the journey a little bit longer to come around those who are still kind of early on in that journey. So really did appreciate David taking the time to talk to us. Let's get into the conversation. Okay, so David, thank you so much for taking the time joining us on the Dad Dialogue podcast today. Can you start off by telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yes, Laurence, super nice to be here. I'm an avid podcaster. I never talk about my personal life, so this is going to be a first.
Awesome.
But I'm actually looking forward to it. Awesome. No, so listen, I'm David. I'm 32. I have a young daughter that's almost 3 months old. I have a beautiful wife. We've been married actually for less than a year as well. Okay. We are both Catholics, so wedding for us means church. Funny thing from the personal side, my wife and myself have been each other's first boyfriend/girlfriend. We've known each other for more than I think it's more than 16 years now.
Wow.
We've had other people in between, right? So we were together, we broke up, we had other relationships, and then we got back together. So it's a very funny kind of weird relationship where even though we've been together, so to speak, for the last bit for like 2 years, not even, it feels like we've been together for a lifetime, which has pros and cons, of course. And then about myself on the professional side, I'm an engineer. I'm an industrial engineer. Never really worked in that area. I currently work in the finance industry, specifically venture capital, and I'm one of the two founders of a company that's a media company, but that also does investing. So I think the cool thing for me when I think about personal and work-life balance, whatever you want to call it, this topic of generational wealth is something that I spend a lot of time thinking, and it can also be something that we eventually talk about or not. On you to tell me.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's an interesting aspect. Why don't we, there's so many places we can dive into, but why don't we go on the back of that, of the work side of things? So you said founder of a company. How large is your company? How many employees?
So we are a small company. Yeah, we're a small company. So we've been around for 4 years, and we are 5 full-time equivalents. And that is, not wanting to bore people with too much with business talk, but that's by design. The AI revolution really helped us bring down our company. We were like almost 10 people at the time, and that we were able to downsize, which was in itself an emotional journey as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I'm curious, the angle I want to kind of start off with, welcoming your daughter into the world only 3 months ago, you must have gone through the kind of process of, as a business owner, I am responsible for keeping this company going, and I have some staff that I'm responsible for their families and their provision. But this is such a monumental moment. How do you kind of balance your time, and how do you kind of think about giving yourself time off in a sense? Because obviously people who work for a company, they will have a mandated or an allowed so much paternity leave that they can then take and they can add holiday on. But as a company owner, how do you kind of approach that for your own time?
Yeah, so I probably didn't approach it in the best way, if I'm being honest. but if we go by bits, right? So before Amelia, that's the name of our daughter, before Amelia was born, we I thought a lot about it, and there was a lot of anxiety around it, right? What you said is on point, right? The stress of people depending on us, the business depending on me, as one of the two heads of the company, like I have my areas of focus, and there's quite a lot of stuff that there's not a lot of people that can do, right, aside from myself. So a lot of anxiety there. I think one thing that I'm very thankful for is I work with a co-founder that is also, he has 2 kids. When we started the company, his second was getting born, right? And so we had gone through the hoops as a team of him needing time to be a dad, right? And on my side, I didn't have any kids at the time, of course, but I've always valued family a lot. So I was also always very open and flexible. And so the good thing about it was that there was a lot of openness to talk about the challenges of it within us, like the 2 co-founders, and a lot of flexibility and understanding on his side, right? Also, we exist as most companies, right? We have our own company, but we have like important stakeholders around us, right? And we have this bigger company that's our main stakeholder, right? And luckily as well, they understand it very well, right? And I think the benefit of being a small business owner, which is how I would define myself partially, is that, if you build your company right, you can surround yourselves with people with whom you have some kind of alignment on a value level, right? And so if I look at my wedding day, all of my important business stakeholders were there, right? And that's not because I was strategic about it, I was inviting them, because I've managed to work with people I like to work with, right? And that made life easier. So that's the one thing, right? Just I was very lucky with the people around me. They were very understanding. There was no pressure. And then the second thing that I did, which huge hack, huge lifesaver, I literally hired an executive assistant 1 month before going on parental leave. Looking back, I wish I had done it 3 months before. That helped a lot, right? But then, where the reason why I said I probably didn't manage it in the best way is because I still did work during my parental leave, right? I did still check my email every now and then. No, I didn't fully disconnect. I wish, I had more time to be fully present. Having that said, like I am quite happy with, how it went. And if I remember correctly, it was like 6 weeks where I didn't work, or I worked very, very little. And now I'm full-time back to working.
That's awesome. No, thanks for sharing. I really like how you said the people you surround yourself with are the people that have similar values to you, and it's kind of like not 2 completely separate worlds of like personal and business. There's crossover, and so that you've kind of got their trust to kind of make that decision. And I think that's a really cool way to put it. And just to add as well,
and that's actually sorry for interrupting you, Laurence. But like it's not necessarily connected to the focus of your podcast, that dialogue, but it is kind of mildly connected, and it's something I do think a lot about, which is life design, right? And like how do you design your life, and how do you think about your life from and let's say from 20 onwards, right? And I think the traditional kind of life design we've seen in Europe is just broken, right? Where you work for someone else, you put in the hours, you're probably underpaid. If you're really an outlier, you'll start a company when you're like 40-ish or whatever, and then you'll reach 60, 70, whatever the number is, depending on the European country, and you retire, and that's it, right? And that's really not how I have designed my life at all, which came with lots of pain in the beginning, and now I'm starting to reap the benefits, to be very honest, which is I don't see, like, there's not a moment in my life where there's a before and after, right? So that for most people, that's retiring, right? And so since I don't see it like that, I think I had the benefit of the last 15 years of my career. I've been building, a life design for myself that allows me to extract value from my life. And that includes my family. It also includes other stuff, right? But it includes my family. And I think it's such an important thing that most people don't really think about these days.
For sure. No, and I think just that kind of ownership of what we're doing with our lives, and like the actions that we take in the here and now to kind of move us towards our goals in different areas of our lives is such a vital thing to really think about. Because if we're not moving towards those goals that we have set for ourselves or thought about, then
Yeah.
we're going the other way. And I've spoken to lots of men that are kind of talking about that. And I spoke to one guy yesterday, actually, and we were talking about how I don't know if you had this at any point, but I definitely have felt before getting married, or like the next stage was always like, the next stage, that's the easy part. Like I would look at people who are married with kids when I was just dating, and be like, they're settled. Like they've got life figured out. They've got the house, they've got the kids, they've got the this, that, and the other. They must just be on easy mode right now. Whereas me, who was like dating or, like courting my now wife, feeling as though that's just, once from there, that's easy. And you kind of get to that next stage, or like you get married and it's like, oh, there's actually some challenges here. And then you have your kid. It's like, oh no, there's actually some challenges here. And there's always just, there's never really going to be a moment where you just kind of like, you're able to sit back and say, oh, now I'm on easy street. But if you put the work in, just from a holistic point of view, for the whole of us, like you said, a life design, the whole areas of our lives, I think we can kind of reap some benefits of things that we sow early on, for sure.
And what I like about what you said is you're going back to this idea of before and after, which we tend to have it, right? And if we go back, like when we were in school, university, first job, and we can see it over and over and over again in every single moment of our lives. And it's like, it's fake. It does not exist, right? And as you said, you thought they'd have everything figured out. And when you find yourself in their shoes, it's like, it doesn't exist, right? So now you have other challenges and you have other desires. And also you're like, I think it's this realization of you become an onion, right? You're still Laurence, but you're also a husband and a life partner, but you're also a dad. So it's like you're adding layers, but it actually becomes more complex. And so that's why I think that before and after kind of concept is a huge mistake that we have. I don't know why we have it ingrained in our brains. Hopefully someone who understands psychology can explain that to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend I understand psychology, but I think you mentioned the school aspects. And I think when we are at school, we're always talking about this year finishes and then you get to do this and then you get to do this. I think even like parents kind of like set up certain boundaries within your year of school, and you kind of have that structure up until you're 18 or at university. So I think having that, it always is like a before and after. It's like, well, before primary school or before high school, before uni and all that sort of stuff. So that would be my assumption anyway. So 3 months, you look well for a dad of just under 3 months old. I think, it's not easy to kind of put yourself in gear to come onto a podcast when your daughter's only 3 months old with various struggles. So as someone who's very recently welcomed the daughter into the world, can you tell us just a little bit about what the delivery process was like, how you felt at different stages? Did you feel useful at these different stages? And kind of what did you do? I think it's really interesting to hear these perspectives, because I think dads that have been dads for a while often forget about these times, but I always find it interesting to hear these stories from new dads.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think before, right, and I said this, anxiety is there, right, all the time. And I think it's the same for everyone. Like, how will I manage? How will I, if you have your own business, you have some layers to it. If you don't, you have other layers to it, right? So like in my personal case, I can work from home, right? That's a huge benefit. That's amazing, right? Most people don't have that. And all of these different components of whatever your life setup is create anxiety. And obviously, like the biggest anxiety bit being like, will I be a good dad? Will I be a good parent? Will our relationship thrive, survive, struggle? All of those like normal anxieties. I think the delivery was quite interesting because we had a doctor's appointment. The baby was due in a week or so after that. Literally, we were told, well, you think today's the day? And the doctor, we were very lucky because the doctor is a good friend of mine, right? So how do you say it in English? The doctor that delivers the baby, what's the specialty? What's it called?
Well, you have midwives who aren't technically
it's
doctors.
Actually a doctor. So in my country, it has to be a doctor delivering the baby, supported by equivalent to midwives. We don't have midwives in Portugal, right? But anyway, the doctor is a very close friend, right? And so that did help a lot. But basically, we're told like today's going to be the day. And she looks at my wife, who's called Inish. Like, Inish, listen, why don't you go and have a nice breakfast, chill, and then come back in an hour or so. David will go pick up all the stuff, and then, we'll deliver that baby. Okay, cool. So we do that. Quite excited. Actually, I think anxiety kind of disappeared a bit there. To fast forward, what was actually an okay, quite quick process. The delivery process was like 11 hours or 12 hours, which for a firstborn is not that bad. So we were quite lucky there. I always say this. I think like the delivery itself was the most bonding experience I've ever had with my wife. It was amazing. I was always there. I didn't want to leave for a second. Best decision I made. The birth was natural, so assisted with medication and all of that stuff, but was natural. It went super well. And to answer your question directly, I did feel super useful. I did feel like my role there as kind of emotional support, kind of being a co-pilot of that journey was super important. And if there's any kind of to-be dads listening in, and to-be moms even, what for us was incredibly life-changing. We did what I'm looking for the English words here, but like it's a course to get prepared for the delivery, but also for the baby, having the baby.
Yeah.
So we did one of those.
Like
we
I
think
we call it like an antenatal class, like that's what we've called it in the
prenatal
past.
class, whatever, something like that. So we did one of those, which was a gift actually from some really good friends of ours. That was like such a cool experience to have that preparation, and it really helped in that process. So both me and my wife were quite aware of what was expected of us, right? And we had a game plan. We had spoken about things, right? And that's really valuable, right? So the process in itself was really amazing. And this, all dads know this, like the first time you see your baby, especially if you're in the room and like it's very raw, right? I was a bit scared I'd be a bit disgusted by it. Actually, I was not. It was like a beautiful moment. First time you hear your baby's voice, first time you grab the baby, like it's life-changing. And for us, it was an amazing process, honestly. I will say one thing. At the end, even though I had been for over 14 hours with my wife, I kind of missed her because there hadn't been any bonding time between us. It was very operational. There was always stuff happening, and we always, so I kind of missed like just hugging her, just having some kind of affection, which was kind of weird realizing that, I think. But all in all, like the experience was amazing.
That's awesome. And I think what you said about the bonding experience, I think that's a really important thing to highlight. For me, I wouldn't say like a bonding experience, but I really like the overwhelming feeling that I remember from my first son, especially, was like I was just in total awe of my wife. Like I was like amazed at like what she had done. I was just like,
I agree.
How have you been able to do this? Like, this has been such a huge thing that you have done, and done with such grace and like compassion and love. Like it's just incredible. So like my love for her in that moment of like, it's done, he's here, was so huge. That was like one of the big things for me.
No, but I completely agree with you. Like it was I've never felt so proud, right? That kind of feeling like, how the hell did all of this happen? So amazing what you've done. And couldn't agree more.
That's really cool. And it's nice that you were able to feel useful and kind of have that set up, and you knew what was going to happen. And the reason I ask this is because from my experience, because both my sons were born in Hong Kong, the first one was born in like the heat of COVID, like right when it was like almost at its worst. Like it had kind of just come down off the first bit of it being worst.
Yeah.
So they just allowed fathers to come into the delivery room up until this point. So we had some friends that had given birth maybe 4 months before us, I think, 4 or 5 months or so. And if they were originally going to go to a local hospital, a public hospital, because they're very, very highly thought after. They're very in high regard. But the thing was, like, the dad literally would not be able to be in with the mum at any point. The dad could drop off the mum at the ward and then pick up mum and baby once they'd been discharged. That was like what could happen during that time of COVID. And even before COVID, like Hong Kong hospitals are quite strict. You can only really be there for visiting hours and for delivery suite. So even if your labor is like long, you're not going to be there anyway. They're going to kick you out because you're not useful. They view you as someone to get in the way. So they want to minimize the amount of time that you're there. So the times that I was able to be there were very kind of short in the actual aspect of the amount of time my wife was there. And because of, we had plans, we had tried some things, and like she had a birth plan that we had written out and given to the hospital as well, but they just kind of disregarded it, to be honest. So then when I was like coming into these things, she has like stories to tell, and I tell her all the time. It's like, you should do a podcast, and like it's really interesting. I'm not gonna share her side of it.
Yeah, you can do a limited series with the moms coming in.
Yeah, get it set up something for her.
But I think what you're saying, so and this was something, it's super dependent on the health systems of where you live, right? Mm-hmm. And that's something that we don't control, period, right?
Yeah.
So in Portugal, the way it works is you have private hospitals and public hospitals. Mm. In public hospitals, similar to what you described. So I would probably only be there for max an hour in total, or maybe 90 minutes in total, right? Mm. I would not be able to stay there after either. Likely my wife would have shared the room with 1, 2, maybe even 3 other moms. Mm. But we've decided to go private. So that means that we've decided to invest. So it is quite pricey to have the luxury of me being able to be there every single minute, being super involved, right? And also after that, it's almost like you're staying at a hotel that's also a hospital, because we had the room for ourselves, a bed for my wife, 2 beds for me so I could change, great food. It's like literally, it's a hotel that has great healthcare, right?
Yeah.
But that was important for us, right? And so like that's kind of what we decided was a priority, and it was a big investment, right?
Yeah, and it was the same in Hong Kong as well.
I have something here that I want to share with you. I was looking for it and I found it. So this is what I wrote when we shared with the family that everything was okay, right? So luckily I have English speaking family, so it's written in English. So I wrote, after a whirlwind of emotions and a life-changing experience, I'm proud to introduce our daughter to the world. I want to celebrate the 2 most important women in my life. My wife, and I tagged my wife, Inês, and our newborn daughter, Maria Amélia, which is her name. And then I wrote, Inês was nothing short of amazing during labor. So this goes to your point. Her resilience, love, and spirit of sacrifice left me in awe. It's funny, I used the same expression that you used just now, right? As we take our first steps into this new chapter of life, I feel more connected to her than ever. Being actively involved during her pregnancy and labor was the best decision I've ever made. My love for her has deepened in ways I couldn't have imagined. Nothing has changed, yet everything has changed. She's truly my inspiration, embodying the strength and grace that I admire so deeply. And then I wrote something for my daughter, which I can share later. But like, this is like, it's so funny that you used some of the same expressions. That's why I wanted to find it. It was amazing, honestly.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think the feeling of awe doesn't come along that often. So it's definitely one of those shared experiences that we have as fathers, for sure. And I think it's really important for anyone, like you said, for anyone that is listening, to just do your absolute utmost to be prepared and to put some pen to paper on a plan of like what roles are, what can be done, what shouldn't be done, and communicate before going into it. I think that's a super important thing. So I was curious, as a father to a young girl, thinking ahead to her future as she grows up, what's your kind of like overwhelming feeling when thinking about the world in which she's developing as a father to a girl? I've got 2 boys myself, so this is something that I don't think about as a father to a girl specifically.
Yeah, good question, right? So I'm fundamentally optimistic as a person, right? But also very skeptic, which is a funny mix to have. And it's connected to my who I am, my personality, but also what I do professionally, right? Of course, right? And so I think like there's a lot of doomsday related talk in multiple areas of our life. I don't really subscribe to that. But I do think that it, and this is my personal view, I do think like most people tend to have negative behaviors, tend to actually do more harm than good. I'm not saying that people are bad, but it's just the actions speak for themselves, right? So I think, you know, when, and it's funny, a good friend of mine asked me a similar question, which was 1 month after she was born. This friend of mine asked me, so David, what has changed in your life view now that you're a dad? Right? It's similar, different question, but similar. And I think, you know, we spent a lot of time and we had a lot of conversations as a couple of, you know, what are the priorities for us in raising our kids, whether it's a girl or a boy, which then was refined by the fact that we had a baby girl. And I think the one thing that I obsess about the most, because, you know, we can think about hundreds of things, but like it's, if we focus on 1, 2, maybe 3, that's manageable. I think the one thing I obsess about the most is how the hell can I do my job so that she has like high levels of self-esteem?
Right.
Because that's probably what worries me the most in the world we live in, right? And I don't think it's necessarily new. I just think it's exacerbated by the world we live in. So I don't worry about, you know, will she be able to deal with technology? Will she have the quantitative skills? You know, I don't worry about any of that. I worry really is like self-esteem. And then I think there's like other layers that come after, but it's more around like what values are important and core for our family, and will we transmit that to her in a way? And that's stuff like the value of family, community, you know, depending on where you're from in the world, these might vary, but we actually have a list of things that we care about in our household that I'm actually a bit late on creating like something to have hanging in the house. That's on me. But anyway, I think the one thing is self-esteem. And then the question is, okay, how do you then do that on a daily basis? And that's where things get really tough. And you know this, right? Because you probably care about it as well, and you have kids, right? So, you know, the example that's given commonly in like people talking about self-esteem in kids is like, what do you say if your kid draws something really nice and comes to you and says, Daddy, look what I made? What do you say? How do you react? Do you say, wow, it's so beautiful, I'm so proud of you? Or do you ask, how do you feel about it, and reinforce whatever they answer, right? And so that's the example that's given, which is complex, interesting, but easily manageable. And so then where it gets tricky for me is like, she's 3 months old. She doesn't speak yet, right? And she's going to go through a bunch of iterations there. And for you as well, right? Depending on age, like there's a multitude of situations happening every single day. And how do you keep yourself reminded of not going to your default reaction? I don't have the answer, right? But it's definitely something that keeps me, I wouldn't say awake at night, but it keeps me awake for an extra 30 minutes every night.
But it's good that you're thinking about it at this stage. It's because I was chatting to someone else yesterday on another episode that would obviously come out in a while from obviously now. And we were talking about this chap had said that he had heard that the way that we communicate with our children becomes their inner voice. And we kind of know that to be true because they when we model how to speak about things, they catch onto that so quickly. Especially like, I know that to be true as a stay-at-home dad because I'm around my kids so much, and the way that we say things, like they pick that up very quickly. And I've read there's a book called How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. There's like it's a classic. There's like How to Talk So Kids Will Listen is a classic parenting book that's been around for a very long time. But then the daughter of the original author wrote a new version to specify 2 to 7-year-olds, which was really cool.
I like that.
And
that's cool.
They basically kind of like bring up like, kind of like what you said, like, oh yeah, good job, it's beautiful. Like you might say this to your child, but let's have a look at kind of like what research says and how to say things. And one of the tips that they said that I always remember, because it's simple, I think that's the big thing, is like, you can be confronted with the thing that you do. The scientists can tell you that you're wrong or it's bad or it has negative outcomes. But if the fix isn't simple, you get in this really stuck mindset and it's so difficult. But they said the simple thing to do, to always fall back on, is just to commentate on it. Say what you see. It's like, this picture has a blue sky and orange grass. Like, and so, yeah, I chose to use orange because I didn't have green or whatever. Like, and then that kind of keeps the conversation going.
Yeah,
and it's just by making that comment, you don't have to fall into the trap of like, oh, well done, it's so beautiful. And it can kind of keep that going. So that's how I kind of do that.
But it's really hard, right? Because you're kind of I don't know, like your subconscious, I don't know, kind of tells you that you should react as in it's so amazing, it's so like validating them, right? But it's that's what's really hard about it. Understanding it is really easy. Doing it is incredibly hard, I find.
Definitely, and it's trying to match kind of like what they're feeling about it. So like that's when you can kind of get to the point, I guess, of asking them how they feel about it, and if it's something that they are particularly proud of or not. My son, my oldest, he'll nearly be 4. He's not a huge fan of drawing. Like he'll bring home drawings from his preschool or his Sunday school and stuff, and you can kind of tell that he's not like that fussed by it. So like we don't kind of say that much about it. Like we don't say it's beautiful because he doesn't think it's beautiful. Like he doesn't really care about it. He hasn't put that much effort in. The thing that he was most proud of was the crown that he got at Sunday school last week, and because he's recently been moved up classes, so he's got the real scissors now. And he's like, I cut all the things off the top. And I was like, oh, okay. Yours is so different to everyone else's because everyone else's is a pretty crown that actually has everything going around, but you decided to cut everything off. So, yeah, I just simplifying it. And I think if it's real, then it's true, and you can say it rather than saying good job or whatever. So, but I think 3 months in, thinking about this sort of thing is a good place to be. I don't think I was thinking about this sort of thing at 3 months in. I think I was kind of just winging it and letting whatever part of my kind of my own upbringing kind of forge how I was going to be a parent. And also I've like qualified teacher, so I would then become very teacher mindset at it, which isn't great for like a 1-year-old.
we were lucky. I'm hesitating if it's lucky is the right word here, but we were planning on getting married, and we learned that we were going to have a baby. So we actually got married when my wife was 6 months pregnant.
Right.
Which in a Catholic wedding, there's some rites that we do and whatnot. To those that know, there's a thing called Prayer of the Faithful, which is typically someone reading out, a group of people reading out some intentions and everyone kind of responding. And we decided to do it differently. So we decided that ours would be, kind of a prayer of sorts, not really, but kind of, where we would both share like what were the core values for our family as we started building it. The fact that we went that 3 months before the baby was born was super good for us, right? Because we actually had all of the conversations about, okay, what really matters in our family, right? And what's the family we want to build? And that was actually really, really nice and helpful. And the values that we decided around was like, know yourself and be yourself, build what you dream, play through life, learn forever, listen with kindness, share your home, cherish family, and lead with love. So those are like the core values of our family. And the fact that we actually wrote like text this long for each one of them and we discussed it, right? That means we were quite aligned when the baby came, right? So that's kind of, we were lucky, but also, you reap what, how do you say the expression in English, where you reap what you sow? Is that it?
So, yeah. Reap what you sow. Or you can like make your own luck, right? Like you have good outcomes from things that you've done. And it's like, I totally agree. And it's reminding me of, I interviewed a chap called Darcy, who was a grandfather. He was like an old mentor of mine when I lived in Hong Kong, and we just ended up speaking so much about intentionality, which is what that is. And he was telling me so much about like things like this, of like making a document where you've spoken about this sort of things, and you've spoken through things, and you've got it there to reference back if you ever have a question of yourself. And my wife and I have done like vision boards in the past because we're quite visual people.
That's
like
cool.
making stuff. So we made it before we had our kids, and like, one of the pictures I found was like a dad with like the kids on top of them, like playing on the floor. like that was such a huge part of my vision of like when we were just first got married. Like this is such a key part of like the vision for us moving forward. So yeah, if you don't have that intentionality and that planning, I don't like partnership is very difficult. So
yeah.
Where should we go next? So much to talk about. Yeah. Oh, I saw on your Instagram you did a house renovation. I saw lots of pictures of hammers smashing through walls.
Oh,
was that you
God.
smashing through walls?
So we had a tough year in a way, but also a super exciting year. And by year I mean last 12 months. So we actually moved into our new house in Jan this year. And so, as you can imagine, we had pregnant wife, renovation work going, which of course ran like super late. They always do. You plan for months, it takes 8. That's part of life. Get used to it. So we had that. Then baby coming. The early days of the pregnancy were a bit tough on my wife actually. And so it was a really tough year. But now looking back, it feels amazing. But yeah, we had renovation works going on. It was exciting, fun, challenging, all while living 2 hours away from the place. So you can imagine how like checking on the construction works was, and moving where I had a wife that couldn't carry stuff because she couldn't carry stuff. She was pregnant, right? So it was not super fun.
So were you able to kind of move in after your baby was born? So like,
no, we were able to move in before. Luckily, right? So that was cool.
Yeah, to kind of get a little bit settled, because the whole nesting thing is so interesting when you're like hearing about this, and this innate desire that a woman has, and like to some extent a man as well. Like I definitely felt it at times as well, of just like kind of like having itchy feet all the time. Like this place is not perfect for my new son or daughter. I can't sit down and watch television right now. I have to go and do something. I have to go and clean or move something or set something up. So I'm not sure if you guys had that at all when, bearing in mind you're having this new place renovated.
It's funny. I don't think we really had it that much, to be very honest with you. I think we did have something that is probably a variation of that, which is, coming from Portuguese families, there's a lot of family values are very core to our culture, right? And so spending lots of time with your family is very common. And I think both of us had a feeling of kind of just needing more time just for ourselves, just being the two of us together more and less with other people, friends and family, to be honest. And that we definitely felt, for sure. And I remember clearly, like, from November last year onwards, like, we were very much closed within ourselves. We liked being with people, of course, but we really felt the need to be just the two of us, kind of bonding. Yeah. So not the traditional version of nesting, but I do think it's kind of a similar process going there in the back, I guess.
For sure. And I think that, people tell you to do that, to try and make the most of that time. It was similar. Like, I found it interesting you said that the doctor told you to go and get breakfast at that stage, because I remember with my second son, my wife woke up one morning and she's like, I've been having contractions like all night, but they're still really far apart. I don't want you to go into work. Like, the older one is going to have, like, he's got his live-in nanny who's going to like be with him. Let's go and have breakfast. Let's go and just like, I can still talk. The contractions are here, but they're very far apart. Let's go and do it. And I don't know if she remembers this, but I very distinctly remember that conversation that we had. Because you do really have to treasure those moments, because obviously once you do have that screaming baby in your house, those moments are a little bit more difficult to come by.
Yeah, especially with two.
Exactly.
I think two is a logistic challenge already.
For sure, but I hear a lot of people with one say that, and then I then talk to people that have 3 or 4, and I'm just like, what? Like, how are you doing it? And so it's always the next thing that's it's always a part of a challenge.
Back to our previous topic.
Exactly. Have you been able to still make that time for connection, to kind of go over, have you found yourself wanting to kind of look over these values and like really kind of like sit down and talk about it? Have you still been able to kind of connect in that way with your wife?
The answer is probably no, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, to be very frank. I think my priority, obviously like the month after, like your priority is surviving, right? Kind of, and making sure that little thing doesn't die. Simple as that. I think with coming back to work and the fact that, so the way we're doing it is we were both together at the house with the baby full time. Then I'm now back full time at work. She's staying with the baby. I work from home, so we're in the same physical space all day. And then likely what's going to happen in 2 months, I'm going to have 30 days just by myself, and she's going to go back to work. And then depending on the schools that we find, we need to find a solution for that. I don't know yet. But point being, my priority was making sure, and I have no idea if I'm doing this right? But with going back to work, that I'm still present in a way or form. The challenge with my job is I travel a lot. So in October, I was 7 times in an airplane. That means my daughter was 2 months old and I was 7 times in an airplane, right? So that's a lot of weight to put on a first-time mom, right? Staying alone with a kid. And so one of my main priorities was making sure that, she could still have time for herself, right? So I probably prioritized that over us having time for each other, right? That doesn't mean we haven't done it. We've actually had a date night a couple of weeks ago. We're still trying, but I think my core priority was making sure that, okay, her focus is to take care of a child, and that's 99% of her day. But I still want her to feel that she has time for herself. And so the agreement that we have is 3 days per week. There's a 2-hour slot during working hours that I don't work, and I stay with the baby, and she can do whatever. She typically goes to the gym because that's what she loves, but she could do whatever, right? And so whenever possible, that's really my focus of just making sure that she has enough time. And then, we always have some time, right now the baby's sleeping. If I wasn't doing this podcast, we'd be chilling, probably making dinner together and chatting about the day, right? So it's a no, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, right?
No, I think that's really good. That's a really good way to put it, for sure, because you can't always be pulling 100% in every area of life because there's just not the time for that. I just chatted to this guy called Mitchell. He's got this channel called Dad Nation, where he's like basically a coach, transformation coach for men and fathers and stuff. And he does this thing with people. He calls it like the life report card. And he says, like, you work out your areas of your life, whether, like, your relationship with your wife, your relations with your kids, your work, your finances, blah, 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 health, exercise, and you rank yourself on A to B to C to D, and then kind of like really reflect on it and think about, there might be one of these that if you're struggling in some areas, like struggling with your marriage or struggling like as a dad, you might have to give yourself, like, purposefully change a C to an F or change a B to an E or a D within the kind of something that's less important on a lower priority. Like you said, you're prioritizing your wife in terms of her solo time right now. And you can't, like, there's not enough time in the day to get A's in every aspect of a partnership. So I think that's a really good way to put it. And I think that is a super important thing and as long as that communication is there, really good thing to prioritize, for sure.
I think one thing that we did speak about before the baby came was like, so to your point of priority, like our firstborn is our marriage. And that has always been super clear to us, right? Our priority is each other first and foremost. And I think right now this decision or this life design choice doesn't have a lot of impact yet. But I think there will come a time where this will make a lot of sense, knowing that we prioritize each other over our own daughter, right? And it's, some people don't like to hear this, but I actually think it's super important, right? Because if my wife's feeling okay, if I'm feeling okay, if we are okay, we will be better parents, right? But that might mean in the short term having to prioritize my wife's needs, as an example, over my daughter's needs, right? And of course, we're talking about a very privileged lifestyle. So these are champagne problems, of course. We're not talking about, core basic needs, right? Having that said, like, I think the one thing that I personally struggle with, and I've been feeling that a lot over the last month, is like with the traveling and so on, is like, obviously, you know, I was last week I was in Milan, Rome, and Abu Dhabi, right? All in 1 week. That means I spent like 20 something hours in planes, and then the rest of the time working, sleeping like 5 hours per night. Obviously, when I arrive, like my energy levels aren't amazing. Honestly, like I am not the most present person, period, right? And so, like, as an example, the first night I didn't wake up a single time when the baby cried, because I was so tired. My body did not react, right? And so I do worry about this, which is I am away for a period of time. So my wife has way more stress, way more responsibilities. Everything's on her. But then even when I come back, I'm still not 100%, right? And so that energy level management that I need to do better on my side, which really don't know how to do it, right? And making sure that this doesn't create more problems and issues in our relationship, but also, you know, in my wife's emotional state and you know, her energy levels as well, which I know she's more tired. She is way more tired this week because I was also less present and also tired when I arrived. So like, how to manage that? That's definitely something I'm a bit anxious about. Let's put it like that.
I think from the experience I've had of talking to other dads who have similar situations, I feel as though there's a rhythm that you kind of get into at some point along the line by trying different things and by communicating. I wouldn't expect anyone with a 3-month-old to kind of have found that rhythm yet. A good friend of mine who helped me kind of set up this podcast, the first episode of it, he's a musician. So for travel, for him, is going on tour. So he always tells me that like tour is this thing where he's like playing these shows, like people are like, he's not like in a huge band, but like, you know, it's a decent paying gig for him as a drummer. So he's playing these shows and people are like coming and they're having a great time. They're coming up and wanting pictures with him and chatting to him. And it, you know, it's just like 2 or 3 weeks of awesome time. And then he gets home and he's not a rock star anymore. He's a dad and a husband who hasn't been there for a while, who kind of has to like, you know, fix things around the house and kind of like step up and get in gear. And the way that he kind of like said it was just like, and he's happy to do that. He's not kind of coming back for like a life of luxury and being waited on hand and foot. And they found that rhythm, him and his wife and his son. And I'm sure you guys will too as well, because you sound like you've got your intentions right with your communication. And I'm sure that rhythm will come.
Yeah, and the good thing is like there's not a disconnect between me feeling like unhappy coming back. That would be a horrible, like there's no such thing as wrong feelings, right? But it would be a horrible situation to find myself in. That's really not the case. I actually find myself going and kind of wishing I didn't have to go, right? So that's a good starting point.
But just, I think, anyone is going to struggle with that amount of travel, whether it be for work or with kids or on holiday. Like travel is tough. So it's fair enough.
We're looking forward to traveling with kids, actually. So that's something we haven't done yet. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's fun. I've got I've got a friend of mine who is from Australia, and he had a really interesting story with the company that he was at. He was able to take off a lot of time. He was able to take a lot of time off. So in the first year, him and his wife just traveled so much, because I knew them when we lived in Sweden. They now live in Germany. His wife is Australian, but has like roots in Switzerland. So they basically have family like in so many places, and they were able to kind of have the finances and the time to just be like, we're going to fly and see as many friends and family as possible and bring like this
That's
growing
awesome.
baby along with us. So he has so much experience with that, and it was really interesting talking to him about that. His name was Tim. If any listeners want to go back and check out that episode. But yeah, it's awesome. I would really encourage anyone that's considering traveling with a young kid to think of it positively, not as this like dreadful, horrible experience. Like it's an amazing thing to be able to do.
People linger on that image of being on a plane and a baby crying nonstop. I think that's ingrained in everyone's mind in some way. Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to it. You know, I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is definitely. So the question to kind of ask all dads as we kind of come towards the end of our conversation is thinking back to before the daughter was born, or their son was born, and before they became a dad for the first time. For some people I ask this question to, they have to think a long time back, but obviously for you it's quite a short time. So do you think there was any advice that David from about 3 months ago could have been hearing at that time before you welcomed your daughter into the world? Anything you've learned now that you think he needed to learn before your daughter came along?
Yeah, I hate that I'm gonna quote a Mika song, but like, relax, take it easy. I think that's like, honestly, like, I've said this like so many times. Fun fact, we've had a lot of friends having babies within the 2-month before and after span of us, which is really cool. So there was a lot of baby talk and, how has it changed your life kind of talk, right?
Yeah.
And what I've found myself using as kind of a reply to the question, how was it, right? How is it being a dad? Like, how tough is it? Is like, it's funny how often I've said this, like, there are some people in life that have had to work for everything they have, right? For whatever reason, good or bad, doesn't really matter. But they've had to work for their studies. They've had to work for their career. They've had to work for their relationships. So they're used to this concept of, if it's worth it, you put in the work, has to be done. Do you love it? Sometimes you don't, but it is what it is. And it's fine, and you'll manage, and you are a resilient person because others have had things handed to them all their life, right? And good for them, happy for them. It's amazing they have that luck, oftentimes because the families can help, right? When it's 4 a.m. in the morning and your baby's crying nonstop and you have no idea what to do, there's no wealthy family or good mom or dad or whatever that can help you deal with that. You have to deal with it, right? Yep. And if you've had to work for everything you have in your life, you have an amazing toolkit to do it. You're ready, right? You don't need help. You don't need any advice. You know how to do it. It's annoying. It's tough. It's tiresome, but you'll manage, right? And so I'm lucky that my wife is someone who's always had to work for stuff. I see myself as well in that group. And so I was actually surprised, to be very frank with you. I thought it was going to be worse. I'm not saying there weren't really bad days and bad nights. There were definitely times at which, like, you don't know what to do. You just want to pull out your hairs. But generally speaking, it's not that bad, right? And I think that's probably what I would have told myself, like, the anxiety, like, bring those levels down. It's going to be okay. You can handle it. It's not going to be terrible.
Yeah, totally agree. That's a good thing to think about. And I think coming to that realization at just 3 months in, that's a good place to be. So I'm trying to think back when my youngest was about 3 months. I was probably still feeling that anxiety. Like I wouldn't say, like, I think I knew it wasn't terrible, but there was still the anxiety of, like, well, it's been okay so far, but what if tonight's the night where it's like, so.
What's tough is, like, that constant nagging feeling of, am I being the best dad I can be? Am I being the best husband I can be? Is this the best version of myself? Is this what I want to be, right? There's no answer to that. And it's always there. It haunts you every single day. And I'm sure it will never stop. Like, even when your kids are adults, I'm sure it stays there. I don't know. It comes in every now and then, and you do your best.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We just do our best. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, David, for sharing all of your stories with us as such a new father. It was really awesome getting to talk to you, and I hope some of the listeners that are maybe a little bit more experienced as a father in their life can. I think it's important for them to hear these stories and just look around them to see the other fathers that are other men that might be becoming fathers soon, or the other new fathers out there as well. And I think it's just important to kind of lift up these voices and lift up these stories. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you. I think this podcast and other stuff similar to it play a huge role of, like, redefining what being a man means in today's world. And I think that could not be more relevant. And super cool to see that you're doing a series of conversations and interviews with guys who are proudly fathers and talking about the challenges and, what went well, what went bad. And I think that that's so needed in the world we live in. And, for me personally, wanting to be a modern dad, whatever that means to me, like podcasts, books, blogs, like were super, super helpful. So like kudos to you for doing this. And I'm sure you get a lot of value as well, talking with different people.
I wouldn't do it if I didn't love doing it myself. So I really appreciate it. And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. Of course, a huge thank you goes out to David for taking the time early on in his parenting journey to come on the show and talk with us. It was a super insightful but also laid-back conversation. I found it super interesting talking to David about kind of his approach to raising a girl in this current world, some of the concerns he might have, and also how he balances his time of being a founder of a small company, and how I really appreciated when he mentioned the whole that his marriage comes first, and that's something that I really resonate with as well. And it's sometimes surprising to me when people are surprised by that, like I say it as well to other people, that my relationship with my wife is far more important to me than my relationship with my kids, because by being a good husband and by having a loving marriage, that's how I can be the best parent. So I really did resonate with David with that. I think it's a super, super important thing to prioritize, and I really do resonate with that, and I appreciate that he shared that with us as well. So thank you for listening today on the Dad Dialogue podcast. If you have any questions, you want to get in touch with me at all, daddialogue.co.uk, all the information is over there. And I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.